So welcome back to session 4 of our Lent course on prayer and discernment, the Ignatian way. And this is due to be our last session of the course, so I do hope you've enjoyed it so far. We've been learning about finding God in all things. We've been practicing stilling exercises to help us notice God's love around us at all times. And sometimes the stilling exercise is prayer in itself, and that's enough for a particular day. But we've also been using those stilling exercises as a way to get ready to pray. And we've learnt the prayer of examen, also known as the prayer of review, to help us spot the consolation of God in our days around us. Last week, we went a little bit deeper into this idea of consolation and desolation. These are concepts we find within a prayer of review, noticing their subtlety and depth. We began to look at something that Ignatius of Loyola calls the discernment of spirits. I wonder how the examen has gone for you this week. Has an increased awareness of consolation and desolation helped you to find more of the gift of God in your day? Sometimes as we practice this prayer, we can be really surprised where God shows up and how God is present in our day. I wonder if that's been the case for you. I'd love to hear about that, if that has been your experience. This week, we're going to look at these practices of consolation and desolation and explore how they can help with decision making. And then, because it's our last session together, I'm going to introduce some ideas around exploring what I call the deeper rhythms of your soul. It's that so what question. What have you noticed about yourself and how you pray over this course? And what are you going to do as a result of that? But first of all, decision making. Discernment in decision making is about bringing head and heart together, noticing that God uses both our thinking and our feelings as we think about the future, and that as we've learnt to use our emotions in prayer, we can also use them in our decision making, although we need to be as cautious as we are about that as when we approach the examen. When we're making decisions, and when we're talking about decision making in this context, we're talking about decisions between things which kind of have fairly equal value in terms of their outcomes. So do I take job A or job B? Do I move to place A or place B perhaps? Do I go on holiday to C or D or whatever it might be? You're weighing up things which actually are both kind of good things in the way that they first appear. It's not making moral choices where it's clear what the decision should be. So as we're making decisions with choices which have kind of lots of very good things and good value in each of the possible choices, sometimes we can get lucky and it's just really clear to us in a moment as to what the right thing to do is. For some of us, we've been practicing this kind of role of discernment for so long and so well, and we've got our kind of things that we look for when we're making decisions, that we can begin to trust our instincts quite well on the way forward. So we can, and often in discernment, when we look at a decision, there's something about confirmation in that for people who practice discernment a lot, rather than necessarily a sense of needing to weigh up. But for most of the time, and for most of us, we're going to need to really work at the area of decision making to make sure that we're making good decisions which are life-giving to us and life-giving to the people around us. So as we weigh decisions up, we're going to be looking for God to guide both our intellect and our feelings. And just as we noticed last week, those feelings need to be explored. The consolation in decision making can get confused with the relief from making a decision, of just doing it. A good decision, however, will feel like the memory of those gifts from a good day, a good meal that leaves us filled up, secure, peaceful. Even decisions which are difficult and will be difficult to follow through should have that feeling of peace about them, even if there's anxiety and nervousness in carrying them out. It will feel good, and that feeling will carry on. It won't just be a momentary thing. So I've put some resources together for you to explore. There's loads of stuff around decision making using Ignatian spirituality online, and there's books on it, and really worth exploring. I put a couple of book recommendations up for you, just nice short ones, if you're interested in taking this further. But I'm also going to give you just a brief introduction to two methods of decision making that Ignatius of Loyola talks about himself. The first begins with intellect, where you're making decisions that apparently have equal value to them, and simply making lists for and against each decision. What are the pros and cons of the outcomes of each decision? But then it's not just going with the longest list. What you're looking for is the consoling weight of that list. What you're looking for is the feelings then. So you've used your intellect, and now you're going to use your feelings, because some of the things on that list will just be more important and more significant than others. So spend some time in prayer with your list. Imagine yourself into the decision. Notice the feelings that come up. Do they linger and stay, or do they drift away, those feelings? If it's not clear, I will often put my list, a physical list, into my pocket or my bag, and I'll wander around with it. And I might kind of add things to it over my weeks or however long I've got to make a decision. And you'll start to feel a sort of weight. You'll be drawn to one rather than the other. The feelings will bubble up for one of those decisions. One will begin to feel like the path of freedom for you. Even if it's the harder choice, it might well feel like freedom. As you do it, notice your thoughts. So if, for example, you presume it's the most difficult decision that must be the right one, the one with most personal cost, just check in with yourself. What image of God you're holding as you assume that? How is God looking at you as you make that assumption? And if the image of God that comes up in your mind is not congruent with the God of love that we've really got to know over these last few weeks, then I'd like to challenge you, that might not be the right decision, and it might be worth looking at it again. Come back to your God of love before you then make a final decision. Make sure you do it in the consoling love of God, not in some idea that God is trying to punish or discipline you. The other method then for decision making is for those of you who enjoy using your imagination. And in this, you opt for a decision, and then you live as if you have made it. Don't make any practical changes to life. Just try and imagine yourself into it. You might do this in one particular prayer session. You might live with it for a few days or even a few weeks and just see how it feels. Notice the feelings, because those first feelings of relief might dissipate, and then you might notice what else is going on. It might become clear that actually it was the other thing you should have done and could do instead. So imagining yourself into a decision is a really good way of exploring. And Ignatius uses both of these, and he journaled all the way through making decisions as well, writing down and talking to people about what you're doing. So that's been a whistle-stop tour in Discernment of the Spirits and a whistle-stop tour in decision making. But there are loads of resources out there, so you don't need to just rely on these videos. Keep exploring. If you've enjoyed this, do dig in and find some more. For now, though, your task at the end of this Lent course is to do some reflecting on how these prayer times have been for you. There's a worksheet attached to this video for you to have a look at with some questions. Some questions to help you prioritise your spiritual and emotional well-being. I'd like you to think about when you feel most alive, where you feel most alive, and with whom you feel most alive. It might be with a group of people, one or two people, it might be by yourself. Notice what you need in order to feel yourself and to flourish, and then build in patterns for that. What's worked for you in prayer in terms of times of day and tools and things that you've used and worked on? Has it been talking it over when you've come to the Lent course, or talking it over with friends and family? Has it been keeping the journal? Has it been making sure you have time in the morning? What's been useful? Have a look back over what you've been doing, and then jot it down. Jot down some patterns. It might be daily, weekly, monthly, it might be annually. What are the things that will help sustain you in your prayer life and in your relationship with the God who loves you and in your own sense of emotional well-being in the months and years to come? Write it down. It's supposed to be something which you can bounce off, and it's supposed to be life-giving. It's not padlocks, so you can review this and flex it and change it as you go. But have a go at allowing what you've learned over the last few weeks and the practice of this prayer to change you and to review how you might approach your conversations with God in the future. So that's the end of our course. I do hope you have enjoyed what you've learned. Do dig into the resources and keep going, and maybe let me know how you've done and how you found it. God bless.